What happens when you build a rally car so radical, so dominant, and so dangerous that the sport's governing body seriously considers banning it? You get the Lancia Stratos, a 190-horsepower wedge of Italian insanity that won 18 World Rally Championship events and 3 consecutive manufacturer titles while terrifying everyone who drove it. Picture this. It's 1974, and you're standing trackside at the Monte Carlo Rally. Through the morning mist comes a sound, not the agricultural grunt of an Escort or the mechanical whine of an Alpine, but something altogether more exotic. A Ferrari V6 screaming at 7,500 RPM. Then you see it, a fluorescent red wedge, barely 4 feet tall, sliding sideways through the corner at impossible angles. The driver's helmet is practically touching the front wheels. The rear end steps out violently, corrects, steps out again. This isn't driving, this is barely controlled chaos. And it's about to destroy everything the rally establishment thought they knew about competition. This is the story of the Lancia Stratos, the most controversial rally car ever built. A machine so revolutionary, it forced the FIA to rewrite their rulebook. So dominant, it made other manufacturers threaten to quit, and so dangerous that many of its own drivers refused to push it to the limit. This wasn't just a car that bent the rules. This was a car that made people question whether the rules even mattered anymore. To understand why the Stratos caused such controversy, we need to travel back to 1970. Rally racing was dominated by modified production cars, Ford Escorts, Alpine A110s, Porsche 911s. These were cars you could buy on Monday and race on Sunday with some modifications. The formula worked. Manufacturers got marketing value, fans could relate to the cars, and costs stayed somewhat reasonable. A good rally car needed to be tough, reliable, and adaptable to everything from Monte Carlo's ice to Kenya's mud. Nobody was building purpose-designed rally weapons because nobody thought they needed to. Enter Cesare Fiorio, Lancia's racing manager, and a man who saw opportunity where others saw tradition. Lancia had been competing with the Fulvia, a front-wheel drive sedan that had won the 1972 championship but was aging rapidly. Fiorio didn't want to just compete. He wanted to dominate, and he realized something crucial. The Group 4 regulations required only 400 road cars for homologation. Not 5,000 like Group 2, just 400. That meant you could build something completely insane, make just enough for the rules, and go racing. The Stratos project actually began as a Bertone concept car in 1970. The original HF0 was a doorless, windshield-less wedge that looked more like a doorstop than a car. But Fiorio saw potential. He convinced Bertone's Marcello Gandini, the man who'd designed the Lamborghini Miura and would later create the Countach, to develop it into something that could actually race. What Gandini created broke every convention in motorsport. Here's where it gets interesting. While everyone else was stretching production cars to go racing, Lancia decided to work backwards. They would design the ultimate rally car first, then figure out how to make it barely street legal. The result was unlike anything anyone had seen. The heart of this beast was pure exotic, a Ferrari Dino 2.4-liter V6. Yes, Ferrari. Through a complex deal involving Fiat ownership of both companies, Lancia secured the engine that powered Ferrari's entry-level sports car. This wasn't some agricultural four-cylinder. This was a quad-cam, triple Weber masterpiece producing 190 horsepower at 7,500 RPM. In rally trim, it would make 240 horsepower. Some works cars pushed 280. The engine sat transversely behind the driver, making the Stratos the first mid-engined car to seriously compete in rallying. But the engine was just the beginning of the insanity. The wheelbase measured just 2,160 millimeters, that's 85 inches, shorter than a modern Mini Cooper. For comparison, a Ford Escort ran a 2,400-meter wheelbase. The Alpine A110 stretched to 2,100. The Stratos was deliberately designed to be unstable. Fiorio's theory was simple. A shorter wheelbase meant quicker direction changes. Rally is about agility, not stability. The suspension was pure racing specification, double wishbones all around with adjustable everything: camber, caster, toe, ride height. The shocks were specially developed Bilsteins with remote reservoirs. The steering was unassisted but insanely quick. 2.5 turns, lock to lock. Most road cars needed 4 turns. The Stratos could change direction like a startled cat. The body was fiberglass, keeping weight to just 880 kilograms in road form, 960 kilograms in full rally specification with roll cage and underbody protection. The shape was pure function. That dramatic wedge nose, it created tremendous front-end downforce, plastering the front wheels to the road. The problem was the rear. At speed, the Stratos generated lift at the back, making it increasingly unstable as velocity climbed. Drivers reported the rear going light at anything over 100 mph. Let me put that in perspective. You're flying through a forest stage at 120 mph, trees flashing by inches from your door. In most cars, aerodynamics help plant you to the road. In the Stratos, the faster you went, the less rear grip you had. It was like driving on ice that got slipperier with speed. The driving position was absolutely insane. The driver sat so far forward that their feet were ahead of the front axle line. The pedals were offset to the center because there wasn't room in the footwell. The windscreen was almost horizontal, just 23 degrees from flat. Forward visibility was like looking through a letterbox. The driver's head was so close to the windscreen that tall drivers had to slouch to fit. Many couldn't drive it at all. But here's the kicker. This wasn't some garage special. Lancia was deadly serious about homologation. They needed to build 400 road cars in 12 months to qualify for Group 4. The production version kept the Ferrari engine, though detuned to 190 horsepower for streetability. It had doors that actually sealed, something resembling an interior, and just enough civility to be road legal. Barely. The Stratos made its competition debut at the 1972 Tour de France automobile, retiring with clutch problems. The 1973 season was for development, with mixed results but flashes of brilliance. Sandro Munari won the Firestone Rally, proving the concept could work. But it was 1974 when the Stratos exploded onto the world stage. The car that had seemed too radical suddenly made everything else look obsolete. Munari won Monte Carlo, the most prestigious rally of all. The Stratos took 5 wins that season, and Lancia captured the manufacturer's championship. But this was just the warm-up. 1975 was total domination. The Stratos won 7 of the 11 rounds. Monte Carlo again, Sweden on ice and snow, Morocco on desert tracks. The car that everyone said was too specialized was winning everywhere. Lancia took their 2nd consecutive manufacturer's title. Other teams were in shock. The technical advantages were overwhelming. That Ferrari V6 gave the Stratos a power-to-weight ratio of 250 horsepower per ton in rally trim. The contemporary Escort RS 1800 managed about 180. The Alpine Renault A310 hit maybe 200. But raw power was only part of the story. The mid-engine layout provided perfect weight distribution, 41% front, 59% rear. Under braking, weight transferred forward to about 50-50, giving incredible stopping power. Under acceleration, it shifted back, putting up to 65% over the driven wheels. The short wheelbase that everyone feared made the Stratos incredibly agile on tight stages. It could rotate almost around its center axis, changing direction instantly. The suspension travel was extraordinary, 200 mm at the front, 220 mm at the rear. Works cars ran even more. This meant the Stratos could absorb massive impacts while maintaining control. The adjustability was infinite. Teams could completely transform the car's character between stages. soft and supple for rough gravel, stiff and responsive for smooth tarmac. No other car offered this adaptability. But the real weapon was the engineering philosophy. Every component was designed for one purpose: winning rallies. The 5-speed gearbox was a work of art, with dogleg first and perfectly spaced ratios. The brakes were massive, ventilated discs all around, unusual for the era. The fuel tank held 75 liters, but was mounted low and central, maintaining balance as fuel burned off. Even the problems revealed engineering brilliance. That lift-generating rear end? Lancia developed an adjustable rear spoiler that could be tuned for each stage. Too much angle, and you'd lose top speed. Too little, and the rear would go light. Get it right, and the Stratos was untouchable. The terrible visibility? Drivers learned to navigate by peripheral vision and instinct. Some said it made them faster because they couldn't see how close they were to disaster. 1976 should have been another Stratos benefit. But politics intervened. Fiat, Lancia's parent company, decided to promote the newer Fiat 131 Abarth. They limited Stratos entries, restricting parts and development. Despite this sabotage, the Stratos still won 3 rallies, and Lancia took a 3rd manufacturer's championship. Bernard Darniche won the Monte Carlo Rally in a privately entered Stratos, beating the factory Fiat team. It was beautifully embarrassing for management. The establishment was horrified. Ford, Opel, and others protested vigorously. How could they compete against a purpose-built racing car? Their production-based entries looked agricultural next to the space-age Stratos. The cost of competing was skyrocketing. To match the Stratos, you needed exotic engineering, not just a hot production car with a roll cage. The FIA faced a crisis. The Group 4 regulations had been intended for modified production cars, not thinly disguised racing machines. The Stratos had exposed a massive loophole: build 400 of anything, no matter how extreme, and you could go racing. Other manufacturers threatened to either quit or build their own radical machines. The prospect of a grid full of mid-engined, short-wheelbase weapons terrified officials. Safety concerns mounted with every event. The Stratos was earning a reputation as a widowmaker. Attilio Bettega crashed heavily in one, though he'd return to die later in a Lancia 037. Henri Toivonen, who would perish in a Delta S4, had massive accidents in the Stratos. The car's combination of massive power, minimal weight, and inherent instability was pushing beyond what many considered acceptable risk. The driver feedback was damning. Even successful Stratos pilots admitted the car was terrifying. Sandro Munari, who won more rallies in the Stratos than anyone, called it a beast that never stopped trying to kill you. Walter Röhrl tested one and declared it undrivable beyond 8/10. Coming from Röhrl, a man who thought nothing of averaging 120 km/h through German forests, that meant something. The visibility problems weren't just inconvenient, they were dangerous. Co-drivers reported being unable to see upcoming corners until they were almost upon them. The seating position meant that, in a frontal impact, the driver's legs would be crushed between the pedals and the front wheels. The fuel tank location, while good for balance, meant you were sitting inches from 20 gallons of high-octane fuel. But the Stratos kept winning. 1977 saw privateers taking victory after victory, even without factory support. The car won Monte Carlo for the 4th time in 5 years. By now, the Stratos had claimed 18 World Rally Championship victories. Add in national rallies, and the number exceeded 50. No purpose-built rally car had ever dominated like this, so what was actually going wrong? The problem wasn't just the Stratos itself, but what it represented. This was an arms race the sport couldn't sustain. Peugeot was developing the 205 T16. Audi was working on Quattro technology. The speeds were increasing exponentially. Stages that had been run at 60 mph averages were now seeing 80 mph. Some fast sections touched 140 mph. The margin for error was vanishing. The FIA's response was gradual strangulation. They introduced Group B in 1982, requiring only 200 cars for homologation. This should have been perfect for the Stratos, but Lancia had moved on to the 037. More importantly, they began limiting the modifications allowed. Power outputs were capped, minimum weights increased. Aerodynamic aids were restricted. The message was clear. The days of unfettered development were ending. But the real story wasn't just regulation. It was fear. The Stratos had shown what happened when you removed all constraints, except the basic homologation numbers. You got a car that was faster than anyone could safely drive. A machine that demanded perfection on every corner because the penalty for error was catastrophic. A weapon that made heroes of those who mastered it and statistics of those who didn't. The numbers tell only part of the story. Beyond its 18 WRC victories and 3 championships, the Stratos changed rallying forever. It proved that purpose-built beat production-based every time. It showed that mid-engine layouts could work on rough stages. It demonstrated that aerodynamics mattered, even in rallying. Every radical rally car that followed, the Peugeot 205 T16, the Audi Quattro S1, the Ford RS 200, owed something to the Stratos. The irony is stunning. The car that was nearly banned for being too extreme helped create Group B, the most extreme era in rallying history. The FIA thought they were containing the problem by limiting Group 4. Instead, they created regulations that encouraged even more radical machines. The Stratos was just the opening shot in a war that would claim multiple lives before Group B itself was banned in 1986. Today, original Stratos examples command astronomical prices. A genuine works car sold for over $1.5 million at auction. Even standard road cars fetch $500,000 or more. There's been multiple attempts at revival, the 2010 new Stratos concept, various kit car interpretations. None capture the original's magnificent insanity. How could they? Modern safety regulations would never permit such a compromised, dangerous design. But here's what really matters. The Stratos represented a moment when engineers were told to win at any cost, and they took that literally. No compromise for comfort, no concession to safety beyond the absolute minimum, no consideration for anything except speed. It was pure racing intent, made barely street legal through bureaucratic necessity. The Stratos forced rallying to confront a fundamental question: how far is too far? At what point does the pursuit of speed override human capability? When does courage become stupidity? The sport is still grappling with these questions today, long after the last Stratos crossed its final finish line. Think about that for a second. In an era before computer simulations, active aerodynamics, or electronic stability control, a small Italian company created something so advanced, so radical, and so effective that it broke the sport. They did it with slide rules, wind tunnel models, and an absolute refusal to compromise. The Stratos wasn't just too wild for rally, it was too wild for reality. The legacy extends beyond trophies and lap times. Every time a manufacturer builds a homologation special, they're following the Stratos template. Every time a rally car uses aerospace materials or Formula One technology, it's continuing what Lancia started. Every time someone asks whether racing cars have become too fast, too expensive, or too removed from production reality, they're asking questions the Stratos first raised. Modern rally cars are faster than the Stratos. They're also safer, more reliable, and more closely related to showroom models. But they're also sanitized. Electronic differentials manage the power. Stability control prevents the worst mistakes. Sequential gearboxes remove the skill from shifting. The Stratos existed in that brief window when technology had advanced enough to build something extraordinary, but not enough to make it safe. Consider the engineering achievement in context. Lancia took a Ferrari engine, a radical chassis concept, and aerospace construction techniques, then made it work on surfaces ranging from sheet ice to loose gravel to smooth tarmac. They did it without modern metallurgy, computer modeling, or electronic engine management. Every solution was mechanical, analog, and irreversible. One wrong setup choice, and you were stuck with it for the entire stage. The drivers who mastered the Stratos became legends. Sandro Munari, Bernard Darniche, Björn Valdegård. These men didn't just drive the car, they survived it. Each had their own technique for managing its vicious nature. Munari used minimal steering input, letting the car rotate on throttle. Darniche preferred aggressive turn-in with careful throttle modulation. Valdegård simply admitted he never pushed beyond 8/10 because 10/10 meant crashing. The mechanical sympathy required was extraordinary. The Ferrari engine was highly strung, demanding perfect gear changes and careful temperature management. The dogleg gearbox was intolerant of mistakes. Miss a shift at 7,500 RPM and you'd scatter expensive Italian components across the stage. The clutch was either engaged or disengaged, no slipping allowed. The unassisted steering went from light to impossibly heavy depending on surface and speed. But when everything worked, when driver and machine achieved that perfect synchronization, the Stratos was untouchable. Contemporary footage shows it dancing through stages, the rear end constantly mobile but always under control. The Ferrari V6's song rising and falling with each gear change. The wedge nose diving into corners at impossible angles. It wasn't just fast, it was balletic in its violence. The cost of this performance was astronomical. A single Ferrari engine cost more than entire competitive cars. Rebuild intervals were measured in hundreds of miles, not thousands. The fiberglass bodywork shattered on impact, requiring complete sections to be replaced after even minor accidents. The specialized suspension components were hand-built and eye-wateringly expensive. Running a Stratos at competitive speeds could bankrupt a small team in a single season, yet privateers kept buying them because nothing else could match that performance. Even years after factory support ended, privately entered Stratos were beating contemporary factory teams. The car's fundamental superiority overcame outdated technology and declining support. It wasn't until the four-wheel drive revolution of the early 1980s that the Stratos finally became obsolete. The real tragedy is that we'll never see anything like it again. Modern homologation rules require genuine production cars as base vehicles. Safety regulations demand crumple zones, side impact protection, and survivable fuel cell locations. Cost caps prevent unlimited development. Electronic aids reduce the skill required. The window that allowed the Stratos to exist has closed forever. What remains is inspiration. The idea that if you refuse to compromise, if you commit completely to a vision, no matter how insane, you can create something that changes everything. The Stratos proved that revolution beats evolution, that purpose beats adaptation, that sometimes the only way to win is to rewrite the rules of the game entirely. The Stratos was nearly banned not because it cheated, but because it exposed the limitation of everyone else's imagination. While others were modifying what existed, Lancia created what should exist. While others worried about practicality, Lancia worried about winning. While others built cars that could do everything adequately, Lancia built a car that did one thing perfectly: destroy the competition. This is the true legacy of the Lancia Stratos. Not just the victories or the championships or the controversy. It's the proof that engineering genius, unleashed from constraint and focused with absolute clarity, can create something that transcends its original purpose. The Stratos wasn't just a rally car, it was a statement of intent, a mechanical manifesto that said, winning matters more than anything else, and perhaps that's why it had to be contained. Not because it was too fast or too dangerous or too expensive, but because it revealed an uncomfortable truth about competition. When winning becomes the only goal, when every other consideration is sacrificed on that altar, you create something magnificent and terrible in equal measure. The Stratos was both. A triumph of engineering and a cautionary tale about the price of that triumph. Today, when you see a Stratos at a historic rally or in a museum, you're not just looking at a car, you're looking at the physical manifestation of pure competitive will. Every angle, every component, every compromise and refusal to compromise tells the same story. This is what happens when you chase perfection without counting the cost. This is what it looks like when you win so completely that they have to change the rules. This is the Lancia Stratos, the car that was too wild for rallying and too magnificent to forget. What do you think? Was the Stratos a necessary evolution that pushed rallying forward, or a dangerous extreme that nearly destroyed the sport? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of racing's most controversial machines, hit that subscribe button for more stories of automotive extremity and engineering brilliance.